going to convene the board meeting this morning. The first order of business is roll call.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Priya Mathur.
Good morning.
Rob Fechner.
Here.
Margaret Brown. Good morning. Steve Juarez for John Chung. Richard Costigan. Here. Richard Gillihan. Here. Dana Hollinger. Here. Henry Jones.
Here.
David Miller.
Here.
Ruben Rubicava, or Ramon, I apologize.
Here.
Bill Slayton.
Here.
Teresa Taylor. Here. And Lynn Paquin for Betty Yee. Here.
Thank you. Well, we have a full complement. I have asked the Vice President of the Board, Rob Fechner, to lead us in the pledge this morning.
All please rise. Hand over heart. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Well, that brings us to the President's report. I have a short report this morning. First of all, good morning and happy Valentine's Day. I see lots of red in the audience. It makes me happy. I want to begin by thanking my colleagues for their support in my role as president of the board. This is my first board meeting, and I hope I don't mess up too bad. And especially to Rob for his guidance during the transition. I see my role as really facilitating a constructive and effective partnership between the board, the CEO, and the CalPERS team as a whole. And in order to achieve a sustainable pension fund, primarily, and a sustainable health care system. For the very long term, where we expect to be in business, I think, well into the future. And key to our success is open, frank, and frequent communication with our stakeholders. That is something I think that we have learned very well, and that Marcy has been really leading us in improving and achieving. It's also crucial, in my opinion, that we engage our members directly, cutting through some of the misperceptions with data and facts. And Marcy and I have been talking about this as something we're going to be doing more over the coming year. So I look forward to working with each of you, to working with the executive team and our stakeholders to make this a terrifically productive year for the system. So now I want to officially welcome Ramon Rubalcava to our board and to the CalPERS family. He joined us for his first board meeting this month. We're really looking forward to you bringing your member benefit experience to CalPERS and to the contributions that you will undoubtedly make to help us ensure the retirement security for our members. Ramon replaces Ron Lind, who served on our board since 2013. Ron is not with us today, but I do want to take a moment of personal privilege to recognize him for his service to CalPERS and this board. As many of you know, Ron encouraged constructive dialogue and thoughtful decision-making on this board, and always welcomed the views of our members, our stakeholders, and our employer partners. He offered important insights on ensuring the financial soundness and integrity of the system, and advocated that the board consider long-term systemic risks, such as economic inequality. Ron's expertise and judgment have contributed to enhancing the financial security of CalPERS members and protecting defined benefit plans. The board has prepared and signed a resolution for Ron to honor his work and contributions to the system, and we will make sure that he gets it. We wish him all the best and express our deepest gratitude for his service. And now I'd like to turn it over to Marcy Frost, our CEO.
Thank you, and good morning, Madam President and members of the board. This morning, I'm going to start off my report regarding the health benefits program. I'll also touch briefly on the CalPERS amortization policy that was heard yesterday, and then bring you up to date on events and activities that are taking place both internally and externally. But first, I'd like to talk a little bit about Optum Rx around healthcare and pharmacy benefits. Of course, we are focused on keeping our members healthy while also providing affordable options to do so. And good prescription medication coverage is essential to positive health outcomes. As you know, and again, we heard in public comment again yesterday, there have been challenges with stabilizing the transition to Optum Rx. Yesterday, we heard about significant improvements in Optum's customer service. Leanna Bailey-Crimmins gave you an update on that. We also know that we have work still to do to get it to the level that our members deserve and CalPERS expects. I am continuing to have conversations with the CEO of OptumRx, John Prince, who remains amenable to looking at policies within OptumRx that may be having negative impacts on member experience. He has committed to continuing to work on this relationship, and we look forward to seeing what he comes up with. As many of you know, there aren't that many pharmacy benefit managers in the marketplace that can handle the size and scale of CalPERS, so it's really important that we are able to get this right. And I encourage our stakeholders to continue talking with us. We will listen to them and continue to talk to the board about problems that they are experiencing. So moving on to health negotiations, February is the time of year when our health teams will begin building on last year's successful health plan negotiations and start the process for 2019 and rates. Last year's negotiations, as you know, resulted in the lowest overall premium increase that CalPERS has seen in about 20 years. In addition to holding the line to contain costs for 2019, which include the pharmacy pricing strategies discussed yesterday, we'll continue looking for innovative ways to reduce the overuse of ineffective or unnecessary medical care and improving the health of our members through programs like the Silver Sneakers program. Combined with what we learned from the open enrollment results that were shared with the Pension and Health Benefits Committee, our teams will work with the plans to support these ongoing priorities. We will also be bringing you preliminary rates to review in May, with the final rates coming to you in June. Now on to the amortization policy. Protecting member benefits takes on many forms, and one of them is the amortization policy that was discussed yesterday. The vote the committee took yesterday is an important step in strengthening the fund for generations to come, as Priya indicated in her comments as well. And I really don't say that lightly, because the amortization policy does just that. It does prevent future generations from bearing the burden of paying for today's unfunded liabilities. And another major benefit of the new policy is that it will save employers money over the long term and will reduce their unfunded liability balances sooner. But we know that these decisions are difficult ones to make for the board, difficult for the team to bring to the board to make the decision, and the impacts to the employers are not easy. But we also know that these are actuarial best practices, and our professional team working at CalPERS and providing you the advice and the guidance that you need to make these decisions from is equally important. On to some events that we will be participating in outside of CalPERS. We have the CSMFO, which is the Municipal Finance Organization Conference. We do have leadership teams that will be attending that event in the next week. First up, again, is the California Society of Municipal Finance Officers Annual Conference on February 23rd. And we'll have a panel, a CalPERS panel. I will be facilitating a dialogue with Charles Azubantan, our CFO, and Fritzi Archuleta out of the Actuarial Office to address pension sustainability and its impact on our employers. It's a great opportunity to meet and talk with decision makers from cities throughout the state and to reinforce our commitment to do what it takes to strengthen the fund and our ability, our primary duty, which is to pay member benefits. I'm also looking forward to meeting with pension industry leaders at the California Association of Public Retirement Systems General Assembly on March 4th. I get the opportunity to talk about the CalPERS culture and how to really reinforce team engagement as part of an important culture for people to work and thrive in. As you know, Donna Lum is a recently elected president at CalPERS. And then speaking of team engagement, we had an outstanding leadership development event here last month to check in with CalPERS leaders on the work that they're doing to implement the 5 values around culture, which I have spoken about in the past. These principles are aimed at driving team engagement with organizational goals that ultimately improve customer satisfaction and also improve our operational efficiencies. We heard from several of them in a video we shared during the event, and I'd like to share that with you now. I think it's important from time to time to give you a glimpse into the organization and some of the work that's happening with the leadership and the teams. So if we could roll that video now, please.
So during the meeting with Marcy, I thought it was a pretty cool idea when she had suggested to send out a survey question. I got some clarification to find out exactly how did she send out the survey question and what was the survey question. And it was pretty simple. What would it take for you to be a fully satisfied team member? My nerves, that's what happened first. I was super scared when I sent out the email, and I was like, really didn't know what I was gonna get back. And for the first couple of days, it was crickets, nothing, came about. I got some really positive feedback initially, so that was really good. Kind of like boosted up my ego a little bit. But then I also got some things that people wanted to have changed on the project. You kind of know as a manager some areas that you need to look into, but sometimes it comes down that you're only one person, you only have a minimum of 8 hours in the day, and you only can tackle so many problems. So some of the issues that the team brought to my attention, I kind of knew that they were there, and now I just needed to address them.
Well, the principle that stuck out the most to me and resonated was the reliable partner principle. In my role in HR, performance management and investigations, our business partners are the labor relations office, the legal office, the program leadership throughout the enterprise, and as those are our customers, we are expected to be a reliable partner to them. I thought I needed to listen more to our stakeholders, so I actually had some really good meetings recently with a couple program leaders, one from an investment office and one from a benefit services division. And I asked for some direct constructive feedback about the services we provide and what more we could be doing to be a better partner to them. And I brought that back to a team meeting and shared it with the team, talked about the pros, the cons, and then anything that we could improve on so that we could give better customer service and that our customers knew we would follow through on commitments. And so that went really well, and I think it's going to improve our services and my team's quality of work overall.
In ESPD, we were focused on effective and efficient operations because Marcy had been talking about it through our goals and objectives. And we were inspired by work that our Senior Leadership Council was doing on an exercise called Start, Stop, Keep.
And I think that, what it really focused on for us from a Start, Stop, Keep perspective is to look at our internal operations to see how we can better serve our customers. One of the things within that exercise in doing that, we wanted to engage our teams. And team engagement is really around providing opportunities for them to give us feedback, but also them being part of the solution.
The lens that we were looking through Start, Stop, Keep really opened it up for them in terms of what should we start doing to better serve our customers, what should we stop doing because it's not adding value, and what should we keep doing because it's working just right. And throughout that process, we were able to leverage Marcy's principles and the tools that were being provided to us by leadership development to help with that engagement.
It's really the buy-in, getting the team's buy-in on how to improve the business and your business processes and whatnot. And we found that because they were so involved in the process, they wanted and really they needed to be involved in the solution.
This year was more of a kind of getting up. What I did is I talked to them about the mission and vision of CalPERS. How is it that what they do each and every day contributes to getting us closer to the mission and vision, the impact that they have on our members and stakeholders. I started to see a lot of communication, a two-way communication. I started to see that they were committed to accomplishing their tasks. They took ownership and accountability, and they felt that they were self-driven. In other words, they have authority and autonomy to do their work. The first outcome that it was noticeable was the quality of work that I was getting from them, the response time. They were doing the work in a shorter time and quality. And then the other way I see it is they were growing, they were developing as employees. They were more up to take new challenges, and they were not afraid to make mistakes. We all learn by making mistakes. It's just not making the same mistake twice. And the other one is we're better able to serve our customers or internal customers. Employee engagement is almost that intangible substance that brings things together, that to me empowers the employee to growth professionally and personally, increase accountability. So just being aware of that and practicing, each and every day.
So I'd like to take a moment to recognize the team members and leaders who volunteered to tell their stories, not only in the video, but sitting up here on this stage for the second part of the leadership series. And they are here in the audience today, so if we could give them a thank you. And then also the leadership development team out of the Human Resources Office and our video production team who does just amazing work on behalf of CalPERS. And this will be some of the work that I get to share on behalf of the team here at the CalPERS event, talking about team engagement and the strategies that our team leaders have really embraced. In addition to helping to develop leaders, we're working with the results of our employee engagement survey, which we received at the close of 2017. We were very pleased with a 70% response rate from our team, and the fact that we did exceed McLean & Company's benchmark score. We did learn also that more than half of our team members are fully engaged, exceeding expectations, and passionate about the work that they're doing. But we also have some work to do in the areas of accountability, recognition, and relationships with senior and executive management. And we are committed to coming up with actions that will improve those scores for next year. Getting back to some of the executive activities, Doug and I will also be joining leaders at the upcoming Government Operations Lean Conference. And this is the first meeting of this type here, and Maribel Badger is leading that effort and has asked us to participate. As you know, I'm a strong believer in Lean as a means to focus our processes on the customer and what adds value, and making sure that our employees and our teams are involved in the problem solving. And I have been able to see firsthand here at CalPERS how effective that can be in helping to improve job satisfaction. So that does conclude my report this morning, Madam President, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Well, thank you very much, Ms. Frost. It is really something to see all of the self-motivated, engaged leaders that we have here at CalPERS, and all of the work that you and your team are doing to continue their development so that we can be the most effective organization in state government. So thank you very much for that. That brings us to agenda item number 5, the consent action items. I would just note for the board that we have a revised travel item. Margaret Brown will be traveling to the CII 2018 conference. So I submit that for your consideration. What's the pleasure of the board? Moved by Mr. Fechner, seconded by Ms. Taylor. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion passes. I've had no requests to pull anything off of the. I'm sorry, that was for both of the consent items, correct?
I just abstained on the minutes.
Okay, please note Mr. Rubalcava's abstention on the minutes. Thank you very much. So that brings us to the information consent items. I've had no request to pull anything off, so that brings us to the committee reports. And first, I will call on the chair of the Investment Committee, Mr. Jones.
Yeah, thank you, Madam President. The Investment Committee met on February 12th, 2018. The committee held an election of the Investment Committee chair and vice chair positions. I was reelected as chair of the committee, and Richard Costigan was elected as vice chair of the committee. The committee received reports on the following topics. Consultants and staff presented performance and risk reviews of the CalPERS portfolios and the first reading of the revision of the Real Asset Program policy. The chair directed staff to do the following: to include information on the economic impact of extreme weather-related events and future economic reports, and to provide data on the low-income cohorts of youth cohorts regarding household information. The committee heard public comment on the support of CalPERS Global Investment Performance Standards, GIPS, compliance. At this time, I would like to share some highlights of what to expect at the March Investment Committee meeting. A report to the California Legislature on Assembly Bill 20, a review of the investment committee delegation, revision of real assets program policy, second reading, supplemental income plans, asset allocation review, and proposed policy revisions, first reading, governance and sustainability principles, ESG strategic plan update, and corporate governance update, proxy voting, share owner campaigns, and corporate engagement. The next meeting of the investment committee is scheduled for March 19, 2018 in Sacramento, California. And that completes my report, Madam President.
Thank you. Mr. Juarez.
Yes, and thank you for acknowledging me. I'm a bit surprised to see there's no mention of the item that I raised on Monday, which is the having staff report back on, as a discussion item, on the breadth of issues surrounding divestment from illegal firearm manufacturers and related accessories. Again, I want to be clear that it was the Treasurer's expectation that we would be hearing that as an item at the next meeting, investment meeting in March. And again, I'm just a little taken aback that there's no mention of it whatsoever.
Well, as I mentioned at the investment committee yesterday, the item is included as part of the ESG presentation, and your request was to move it out and make it a separate item, and I said I would take a look at it, and I do want to talk with staff before we do that.
You know, and I would hope you share that directly with the Treasurer when you make that decision.
Thank you, Mr. Juarez. That brings us to agenda item number 7B, Pension Health Benefits Committee report. Mr. Fechner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Pension Health Committee, PHBC, met on February 13, 2018. The committee elected Rob Fechner as chair and Teresa Taylor as vice chair. The committee recommends, and I move, the board approve the following. Agenda item 4B, approve staff's recommendation to deny members' request for a new form of retirement option settlement 4.
So there's a motion before you. Before I move to the vote, I just wanted to ask Mr. Behrens, did you have a comment on the two action items or a general comment that you wanted to make at the end of this report? Okay, thank you very much. So on the motion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes.
Agenda item 6, approve staff's recommendation to pursue the proposed regulation defining full-time employment.
On motion by committee, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes.
The committee received reports on the following topics: public agency recruitment and retention for the health benefits program, the self-funded preferred provider organization value-based insurance design proposal, improvements with Optum Rx, and potential pharmacy pricing strategies for 2019 and beyond. The chair directed staff to provide the committee research relating to high-deductible, low-cost plans and its potential impact to active and retiree populations. Evaluate the impact to active and retirees when sponsoring agencies leave the CalPERS Health Program, and provide more in-depth analysis on savings and alternatives regarding the value-based insurance design proposal. At this time, I would like to share some highlights of what to expect at the March PHBC meeting. The committee will review the PHBC delegation. The committee will hear information on health beliefs, retired members' cost of living, 2019 health plans and rates, and population health. The next meeting of PHBC is scheduled for March 20th, 2018 in Sacramento, California. That completes my report, Madam President.
Thank you, Mr. Fechner. That brings us to agenda item number 7C, Finance and Administration Committee report. For that, I call on the chair, Ms. Taylor.
Thank you, Madam President. The Finance and Administration Committee met on February 13th, 2018. The committee held an election for Finance Administration Committee Chair and Vice Chair. Teresa Taylor was elected as Chair. Richard Costigan was elected as Vice Chair. The committee recommends, and I move, the board approve the following. Agenda item 4B, approve the June 30th, 2017 Judges Retirement System Actuarial Valuation Report and Employer and Employee Contribution Rate.
On motion by committee, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes.
Agenda item 4C, approve the June 30th, 2017 Judges Retirement System 2 Actuarial Valuation Report and Employer and Employee Contribution Rates.
On motion by committee, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes.
Agenda item 4D, approve the June 30th, 2017 Legislators Retirement System Actuarial Valuation Report and Employer and Employee Contribution Rates.
On motion by committee, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes.
Agenda item 6A, the committee reviewed the delegation from the board to the committee and has no recommended changes for the board.
On motion by the committee, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes.
Agenda item 7A, approve adoption of changes to the amortization policy for all public agency, state, and schools actuarial valuations as recommended by the actuarial office in the agenda item.
We do have some public comment on this item. I'll call down Mr. Futrell and Mr. Lee. If you can take these two seats here to my left. Identify yourself and your affiliation for the record, and you'll have 3 minutes each to speak.
Thank you very much. We'll be brief. My name is Mike Futrell. I'm the city manager for the city of South San Francisco. I read a statement yesterday, but today just a comment, and that is we would greatly appreciate if beyond today we could have some respite and a period of time when there are no additional rules or regulations which will make it harder for the employer to make those contributions. The item today by itself in a silo, yes, it does increase the burden, but not dramatically. If this were the only item, we would have no difficulty paying the additional $2 million this particular item will cost the city of South San Francisco. But you put that in the same category as the rate reduction, and before that, the risk management strategy, and before that, the amortization smoothing. All of those combined have created a huge burden for the employers to pay their portion. So we are your business partners, and we'd like for you to look at us in that way. We need you. We need a solvent retirement system so that we can recruit, retain, and take care of the public servants that serve the people of California. And you need us. You need us solvent and able to pay so that that system remains solvent. So we need each other. So today, one more change, which will negatively impact, although in a small way, most of the employers that are paying in California. And we would just ask for some time to talk to our voters, to talk to our labor groups, and develop a plan where we can come up with the additional revenue to pay for the heavier PERS contributions, which we recognize we must make. But that doesn't happen overnight. It takes a long time to educate voters and businesses on why they should pay more, to educate our labor groups on why we should be at the table negotiating and having the employees paying a heavier part of the PERS obligation. So that's the message for today. Please send a clear message to all of the agencies in California that there are no additional things that will come out of the closet, things that will cause us to worry, and instead we should be focused on raising revenue, reducing expenses, and finding a way to pay the bill that is currently before us. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Mr. Lee.
Good morning, Madam President and members of the board. Again, Richard Lee, Director of Finance for the City of South San Francisco. Yesterday, Mr. Futrell and I addressed the Finance and Administration Committee, so I won't recapitulate those comments. Rather, I have a few observations and requests. First, as part of the staff report and presentation to the Finance and Administration Committee, the accompanying scenarios illustrated projected investment returns that match the discount rate, 3% and 11%, with 3%, excuse me, reflecting the 25th percentile and 11% representing the 75th percentile. Board Member Costigan remarked that during Monday's investment committee meeting, CalPERS projected ROI over the next 10 years will be 6.1%. This is consistent with remarks that Mr. Costigan shared almost 1 year to the day at the annual CSMFO conference here in Sacramento. I applaud the actuarial department's efforts. Over the past 6 years, they have made great strides to make the annual actuarial evaluations more robust and full of pertinent information for member agencies. I found them to be very responsive to our inquiries. and I'm thankful for their presence at regional events such as the annual CSMFO conference. That being said, while I don't wish to place additional burden on the department given their heavy workload, I would ask for additional information to be provided in the sensitivity analysis of the actuarial evaluation. For example, in the current sensitivity analysis, it does show percentile returns. However, given the information that Board Member Costigan provided of 6.1%, we'd ask that that information be projected in terms of contribution rates, UAL, normal cost, specifically over the next 7 to 8 years rather than just the 3 years that are currently shown. This concludes my comments, and thank you for your consideration.
Thank you very much for your comments. I'm going to call down Mr. Hutchings, Jane Hutchings as well. If you could identify yourself and your affiliation for the record, and you'll have 3 minutes to speak. And I would just note, I apologize, I neglected to call down Mr. Behrens for public comment on 7B. So at the conclusion of the Finance Committee report, I will invite you down to speak. Apologies for that. Mr. Hutchings.
Good morning, Chair, members. Dane Hutchings of the League of California Cities. As you heard from one of my members from the City of South San Francisco, this may be a challenge for some of my cities. Again, you've heard from other of my cities that they're welcoming the change. So again, no change in our position with regards to formally weighing in on the amortization schedule. However, I had a very brief moment to sort of scan through the hardship criteria that is outlined for some of those struggling agencies, and I can tell you that in the limited time that I had to review, it did seem somewhat complex. There were significant hurdles for really any agency to try and qualify for such hardship criteria, and including, there was a section, again, I can't quote it for you exactly, but essentially it gives full discretionary authority from the chief actuary to make the determination. I would argue that while it is the charge of this body to honor the fiduciary responsibility of the fund, I joke around with your actuarial team that you guys still have not built in an assumption for employers that can't pay anymore. Really, there is a real fear that even if it's 10% of my membership, which would constitute about 47 cities, not being able to pay would cause significant ripples not only through our state's economy, but for this fund. And so I would ask that as you adopt this revised policy, that during the time at which we are implementing these policies, that this board and the staff work with the League of Cities and the other employer partners to try and take a better look at the hardship criteria to ensure that, look, I don't want this to be a free-for-all where everybody's running to the same status quo. I understand that you guys had to make a tough decision, but I do believe that there should be a criteria that will enable cities not only to be able to qualify for this, but to easily navigate it. I think one of the big challenges, too, that I hear from my members is that it's often very difficult to navigate the bureaucracy of CalPERS. And again, we've talked about this before. CalPERS has the highest complexity score of any pension fund in the country. So it's we have the most members. It's going to be a challenge, but I am here. Our members are here. We're wanting to be a partner with you guys. We just ask that we take a hard look at some of the issues that surround some of the current criteria and make it easy for those folks who are struggling. Again, it's those cities who they may not be as advanced. They've got small teams, and it'd be really hard to check all those boxes. So again, certainly asking that we work together to ensure that those cities that are on the bubble can maintain their payments and quite frankly, ensure they can retain their public employees and pay their obligations. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hutchings. On the motion, Ms. Brown.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to thank the League of California Cities and the City of South San Francisco for their comments today. I, too, had questions about the hardship criteria. I don't necessarily agree that I want to make it easy, but maybe not super tough. Again, it's supposed to be a hardship, so it's supposed to be difficult to qualify. And then, since I'm not on the committee, I do wonder if we anticipate any other rule or regulation changes coming in the near future that will impact our employer partners. I don't know if we have a calendar or how that works here, but I think it would be interesting for me to know and our employers to have some confidence.
So, Ms. Frost, do you have an answer today, or do you think that's something you would like to come back on?
So I do have a comment on the hardship process. And so after the Finance and Admin Committee yesterday, I did make a commitment to cities, counties, and special districts, Dane, Dillon, and Dorothy, that within the next month we would sit down with them and walk through the hardship process and find out where that could be made more clear to the extent that we have flexibility, take advantage of that flexibility, and then when we've had that opportunity to work with the employers, bring that back for your review as well. And then on anything within the next year that we anticipate impacting employers, because the discount rate was just changed in December, our mid-year cycle is about 2 years out for that. I would have to talk with the actuaries offline to see if there's anything from a policy level coming from them. But the experience study was just recently done as well. So the major policies are done, but there could be other smaller policies that could have an impact. I don't want to make that commitment that there is no impact, but the significant policies have been addressed.
But I think what we can commit to is doing a scan for the next year or two, things that we anticipate, and communicating as clearly as we can about that.
Yeah.
Okay, terrific. So any other comment on the motion or discussion of the motion? So then on the motion by committee, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes.
Agenda item 8A, approve the notice of election for the 2018 CalPERS Board of Administration state, schools, and public agency member elections.
On the motion, Ms. Brown.
Thank you again, Madam Chair. At yesterday's Finance and Administration Committee meeting, we did approve the notice of election, or the committee did. I don't sit on that committee. And during that discussion, information was provided that the voter's signature and barcode or other identifying information will no longer be required on the ballot, and I thank the staff for that. However, the larger question of whether the California Constitution that says voting shall be secret applies to our CalPERS elections. And I'm wondering if our general counsel could answer this important question at this time.
Mr. Jacobs.
Well, I believe we've addressed this in a fact sheet that we provided both to the board and to the public at the time. And frankly, I don't remember what it says at this point, but I think it's fully addressed there, and I'd be happy to come back with further explication of that point if it's not clear in the fact sheet.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jacobs. On motion by committee, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes.
Agenda item 9A, approve adoption of the 5.25% discount rate and assumption for the long-term care program.
Sorry, on motion by committee. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passed. Oh, I'm so sorry. We did have some public comment on this item. So let me bring down Ms. Snodgrass. If you could identify yourself and your affiliation for the record.
Good morning, thank you, and congratulations again on your election, Ms. Mather. Yesterday, I had a question about premium increases on the long-term care with this assumption, and I did a little more reading last night. I apologize, I was thinking of something else yesterday anyway. But I have a couple of questions maybe you can answer, the actuaries can answer. Reading the information and using the new assumptions, the long-term care program appears it will be underfunded with a margin of a negative 1.45. And the goal has always been to be a positive 10 for this. So with this information, it appears that there will have to be a future premium increase. So can anyone give me an idea when that increase will happen in the premiums? If we stay negative, there will have to be a premium increase, and I'd like an idea of how soon that's coming.
Mr. Toronto, do you want to address that question? Sure. Thank you.
Scott Toronto, Chief Actuary. The discount rate is just one particular item that goes into whether we need a premium increase or not. The actual returns on the fund, the experience, the claims cost, there are a number of factors that go into our analysis on whether we'll need a premium increase or not. We've had negative margins in the past that have not generated premium increases. This is a very small negative margin. It just turned negative, and we are going to kind of monitor it and see where things go. I can't say where things will wind up in the future. It just depends on how things play out on experience-wise, but we don't see a need for a premium increase in the near future.
Thank you.
So we don't know.
I could say currently we don't expect a premium increase. I can never say never because
it depends on experience.
Okay, there's only 2 revenue sources.
Thank you. Okay, so that motion was voted on and passed.
Yes.
Please continue, Ms. Taylor. Thank you.
The committee received reports on the following topics: 2017 CalPERS Board of Administration member-at-large election results, and the annual diversity report. The chair directed the staff to continue work on potential legislative changes relating to schools reporting requirements, bring back recommendations on amortization policy, early opt-in options, and information on developing a CalPERS 115 trust. Review the CalPERS Board of Administration election phone voting process to include candidate names in lieu of asking voters to remember candidate order, and identify if there's an option to bypass directly to vote for the candidates. Provide additional information on gender demographics for program areas at the manager and staff levels, and board diversity. Gather and provide a report on vendor contracting employee diversity. The committee heard public comment on the following topics: amortization policy and the long-term care discount rate assumption. At this time, I would like to share some highlights of what to expect at the April Finance and Administration Committee meeting. The 2018-19 annual budget proposal, it's going to be the first reading. The annual review of board member employer reimbursements. The asset and liability transfer to the San Bernardino County Employees Retirement Association. EMC IT contract extensions. And valuation and employer-employee contract contribution rates for both state and school employees. And the next meeting of the Finance Administration Committee is scheduled for April 17th, 2018 in Sacramento, California. And that's my report, Madam.
Thank you, Ms. Taylor. Before I turn to the chair of the Performance, Compensation, and Talent Management Committee, I would like to call down Mr. Behrens at this time. Thank you for your indulgence. I apologize for not calling you in conjunction with the report from the Pension and Health Benefits Committee. Please identify yourself and your affiliation for the record, and you'll have
Thank you, Madam Chair, board members. Tim Behrens, California State Retirees. Yesterday, I left off on the discussion, and I want to start where I left off, and that is, again, supporting the health incentives for rebates in the VBID proposal and supporting efforts to control health care costs. There was a discussion about higher deductibles, and I would just remind you that historically, about 2 years ago, the governor had an open forum on higher deductible medical for state employees, and during that discussion where they had 2 experts there talking about how well it was working for them in other states, one of the things that happened was that the information that was given did not go past the age of 50. So there doesn't seem to be any data out there about how higher deductible insurance may or may not influence the way people buy or do not buy medical help, or whether or not they actually die because they can't afford it, et cetera, et cetera. So I just wanted to throw that out there, so maybe staff can find someplace in other states in the United States where they have higher deductible plans like that, whether or not there's any data to suggest that there actually is a negative impact on the employees because of the higher deductible, even though they're paying a lower premium. Because I know that when I worked for the state for 42 and a half years, and when I started working for the state, if I could have paid less for my medical insurance, I would have been happy to have taken that, not thinking about being 71 today, and glad I have medical insurance. So that's all. Happy Valentine's Day. Have a good day.
Thank you very much for sharing your insights. Appreciate that. Now I'll move on to agenda items. Oh, I'm sorry. We do have a comment from Mr. Jones.
Yeah, thank you, Madam President. Yeah, I would like to ask Madam President if staff can look into that request about the impact of those individuals at a higher age.
So I think staff is already going to be bringing back information and analysis around high deductible plans. Thank you. So now I will call on the chair of the Performance Compensation and Talent Management Committee, Mr. Slayton.
Thank you, Madam President. The Performance Compensation and Talent Management Committee met on February 13th, 2018. The committee held an election for committee chair and vice chair. I was elected chair, and Richard Costigan was elected vice chair. On agenda item 7, semi-annual status reports on incentive plans for the Chief Executive Officer and Chief Investment Officer, the committee recommends, and I move, the board approve the fiscal year 2017-18 semi-annual status reports of the CEO and CIO and changes to the CIO's plan as amended by the committee and shown in attachment 1.
On motion by the committee, any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion passes.
Thank you. On agenda item 8, review of the Performance Compensation Talent Management Committee delegation, the committee deferred that item to a future meeting. Agenda item 9, executive compensation policy discretionary modifier. The committee recommends, and I move, the board approve option B to amend the executive compensation policy discretionary modifier and increase flexibility by allowing discretion to be exercised upward or downward on an award by any percentage.
On motion by committee, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion passes.
The committee chair gave direction to bring back information at future meetings on the following: analysis of the committee's delegation resolution and proposed changes, analysis and information related to incentive compensation pay structure, including long-term incentive opportunities, options for the enterprise operational effectiveness metric, and information on the stakeholder engagement metric. The committee also directed staff to work with the board's executive compensation consultant to explore the possibility of differentiating the CEO incentive plan from her direct reports. The next meeting of the Performance Compensation Talent Management Committee is scheduled for March 20th, 2018 in Sacramento, California. And that completes my report.
Thank you. That brings us to agenda item number 7E, the report from the Risk and Audit Committee. For that, I call on the chair, Ms. Hollinger.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Risk and Audit Committee met on February 12, 2018, and elected Dana Hollinger as chair and Bill Slayton as vice chair. The committee recommends, and I move, the board approve the following. Agenda item 6, the proposed Risk and Audit Committee delegation resolution be brought to the board for approval along with the other committee delegations.
On motion by committee, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion passes.
The committee received reports on the following topics: the 2017-2018 mid-year plan updates for the enterprise risk management and enterprise compliance. At this time, I would like to share some highlights of what to expect at the June Risk and Audit Committee meeting. 2018-2019 plans for enterprise risk management, enterprise compliance, and the Office of Audit Services, the independent auditor's 2018 annual plan, and the semi-annual enterprise risk management framework review. The next meeting of the Risk and Audit Committee is scheduled for June 19th, 2018 in Sacramento, and that concludes my report.
Thank you very much. We have had no meeting of the Board Governance Committee, so we have no report under 7F. That brings us to agenda item number 8, the proposed decisions of administrative law judges. And for that, I will call on the Vice President, Mr. Fechner.
Thank you, Madam President. Is Mr. Shaw with us today?
Yes. Oh, I believe Mr. Shaw is on the phone.
Thank you. I move to adopt the proposed decisions at agenda items 8A, 8C, and 8D, and 8F through 8V, with the minor modifications argued by staff to agenda items 8A, 8D, 8P through R, and 8V. 2, to remand agenda item 8B for the taking of additional evidence as argued by staff. And 3, to remand agenda item 8E for the taking of additional evidence regarding the member's psychological condition. And F, remand agenda item 8W for the taking of additional evidence regarding the board's duty to comply with the eligibility requirements of the PEARL, as well as applicable eligibility requirement rules related to the tax qualification requirements of the Internal Revenue Code, Section 401A.
Is there a second to the motion? Seconded, made by Fechner, seconded by Taylor. On the motion, Mr. Miller.
I'm not sure.
Move the mic just a little bit closer.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I haven't been through this particular process on these items, but I have some real concerns on agenda item 8H. And I don't know that I support the recommendation on that particular item. So is that an item we could?
So let's take 8H up separately.
Okay.
So we'll remove.
Okay.
Yep. Any other comments, discussion by the committee on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed. Motion passes. Now on 8H, Mr. Miller, if you could, let's see. Your mic is on.
Yeah, on 8H, in looking at the detailed material we had before us, particularly the respondents' kind of reply and rebuttal to the decision and the material that was presented, I really, in this case, with this highway patrol officer, the way these 14 required capabilities were applied, and it just seemed like there was, to me, it seemed like there was lack of recognition of what's really required to do that job. And the idea that this officer would be able to occasionally do some of these things in an isolated way, and just the whole decision seemed to be predicated on that kind of model versus, could this officer do this job? Would this officer be able to be hired for this job? Would I be able to count on this officer to run 100 yards, to go up embankments, to jump over a guardrail, to drag me out of a burning car? And I just didn't find that to be compelling. I felt that their rebuttals to some of those arguments and just seemed to lack the real recognition of what it takes for this job, and as a citizen, what I would expect a highway patrol officer to be capable of. And so I had serious concerns. Just incidentally, I also felt that in another case that I approve of the decision, but again, I saw this seeming lack of acknowledgement, recognition, or full understanding of what a job requires in law enforcement or in an institutional environment, for example. So I wanted to bring that out.
Forgive me, Mr. Miller, a point of order, Mr. Costigan.
Thank you, Madam President. I don't believe this is the proper place to debate the merits of it. I would support Mr. Miller's motion, should he make one, that we would hear the case and have his concerns, or that Mr. Miller would dissent. But as neither party is present, debating the merits of the case probably isn't appropriate at this time. So if you would make a motion that you'd like to hear the case, I would be happy to second that motion if you would like.
So the options are for the board to hear the case, to remand it to the ALJ for the taking of additional evidence, if there's a particular point where you would like more additional evidence to be considered. Those are the two options, as I understand it.
Or the third one is to adopt.
Or the third one is to adopt the recommendation.
And Mr. Miller could dissent, voting.
Mr. Shaw, are there any points that you heard in Mr. Miller's comments that you think would merit the taking of additional evidence?
Yeah, thank you, Madam President. Good morning. Yeah, I think that those are the options that you laid out. If the board wishes, it can remand the case for additional evidence on the 14 critical tasks. I'm not sure if it's necessary to go directly to a full board hearing, but of course that's an option that the board has.
Yeah, well, I certainly appreciate, thank you for that, Mr. Costigan. I would move that we hear this case.
Motion's been made for a full board hearing on this case. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All oppose?
No.
Please note Mr. Fechner's no and Mr. Slayton's no. Motion passes. That brings us to agenda item number 9, petitions for reconsideration. For that, I call on Mr. Fechner.
Thank you, Madam President. I move to deny the petition for reconsideration at agenda item 9A.
Motion, is there a second to the motion? Second. Motion made by Fechner, seconded by Taylor. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. That brings us to agenda item number 10, state and federal legislation update.
Good morning, Madam President and members of the board. Mary Ann Ashley, CalPERS team member. I will be presenting agenda item 10, the state and federal legislative update, which is an informational item. And then following, Ms. Ostrander will be providing an update on 2 executive orders that were recently issued by the governor. The California legislature reconvened January 3rd to start the second year of this 2-year cycle. And as you can note in your updated legislative summary, most of the 2-year bills that we have been tracking and monitoring failed to meet the specified deadline, so they will no longer be moving forward. However, there are a couple of bills that I would like to highlight that are still active. AB 1597 by Assemblyman Member Nazarian, having to do with divestment of specified Turkish investment vehicles. That bill is currently with the Senate PERS Committee, and we continue to engage and work with the author on potential amendments. SB 656 by Senator Morlock, having to do with the Judges Retirement System 2 deferred retirement. CalPERS did provide an actuarial impact analysis to the member, and we are working with the member on conforming amendments. I'm happy to report that we have secured authors for all 4 of our sponsored bills for 2018. The annual housekeeping bill will be carried by the Assembly PERS Committee and is pending introduction. The bill that seeks to provide board authority to set the performance standards and compensation for the Chief Health Director and the Chief Operating Officer will be authored by the Majority Floor Leader, Assemblymember Ian Calderon, and that is pending introduction. The bill relating to the terminating agency process will be authored by Senator Pan, who is chair of the Senate PERS Committee. And Senator Pan introduced that bill on February 7th, and the bill number is SB 1022. And then our sponsored bill relating to service credit purchase payments will be authored by Assemblymember Cooper, who is a member of the Assembly PERS Committee. Mr. Cooper introduced that bill on February 12th, and the bill number is AB 2196. The deadline for bill introduction is this Friday, February 16th, and the Legislative Affairs team is continuing to review all bills as they are introduced to identify those that have potential impact to CalPERS. We have identified a few bills that were introduced just this week and last that would potentially impact CalPERS that I'd like to highlight. Senator Morlock has introduced 3 bills that we are monitoring and working with Program Area to determine the impact to CalPERS. Senate Bill 1031 would suspend retirement allowance cost of living adjustments if the unfunded liability of a pension system is greater than 20%. SB 1032, which has to do with contracting agency termination provisions, and SB 1023, which has to do with the transfer of actuarial liability between employers. So we are currently working with program areas to identify the impact of those 3 bills. And then also Senator Mendoza introduced 2 bills relating to member notification for delinquent payments by CalPERS and CalSTRS employers. So we will continue reviewing all the bills as they're introduced, and we will keep the board updated as to those that impact CalPERS. Things have been equally busy on the federal side. As you know, President Trump signed H.R. 195, which is the extension of the short-term appropriations for fiscal year 2018. As Leanna noted yesterday, this resulted in the postponement of the excise or Cadillac tax and the medical device tax, and also suspended the tax on health insurance companies. And as previously reported, the UBIT provisions were ultimately not included in the tax reform bill signed by the President. So in January, CalPERS team members, along with our federal pension and retirement representative, met with several congressional member offices to thank them for their efforts on opposing the provision and ultimately keeping it out of the tax reform bill, and also to discuss CalPERS concerns regarding potential PEPTA legislation and other legislation of concern to CalPERS that would impact public sector defined benefit plans. And team members met with the staff members of Devin Nunes, Judy Chu, Linda Sanchez, Kamala Harris, and Dianne Feinstein. And then on February 7th, CalPERS submitted a letter to William Hinman, Director of Corporation Finance of the SEC, stating our opposition to forced shareholder arbitration provisions in public company governing documents. We are also currently reviewing proposed language that was referred to us from the Treasurer's Office for potential California legislation to address this issue. And then finally, team members will also be meeting with congressional members at the end of this month following the NASRA conference to further establish our relationships and to discuss key topics of concern to CalPERS. This concludes my update, and I am happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Ms. Taylor.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Ashley. You always bring a very comprehensive report, and as I was going through everything and looking at it, I just wanted to make sure moving forward that some of these state bills that impact the retirement system that we're very active in opposing, because a lot of it looks like it would negatively impact the retirement system. So as these go forward or don't get heard, I'd love to hear the updates on that.
Certainly.
Thank you.
Thank you. I see no further requests to speak. Thank you very much. Ms. Ostrander?
Good morning, Renee Ostrander, a CalPERS team member. As Mary Ann mentioned, Governor Brown recently signed 2 executive orders. Those orders were regarding the wildfire recovery that's currently happening both here in Northern and in Southern California. Those executive orders, B4317 and B4618, lifted some of those restrictions on the hiring and utilization of retired annuitants. The 2 restrictions lifted are related to the 180-day wait period after retirement, and then the 960-hour fiscal year limit that a retiree can work. All the other requirements regarding retired annuitants still apply, and those temporary changes will be in effect until those executive orders are lifted. The one thing the executive order does require is that all employers, not just state employers, but all employers are required to submit their information to CalHR. So as a result, CalPERS has taken multiple steps to address this executive order. First, we've released a circular letter to provide our employers information on both which restrictions are lifted and that the remaining ones remain in place. We've also identified the email address that CalHR is utilizing to ensure that our employers know where they need to provide the information. Secondly, we've established a process in concert with CalHR to receive that information from them, so when our systems trigger alerts on the 180-day wait period and on the 960-hour work period, that when those come up for us, we will have that information from CalHR, so we will know that those restrictions are approved and can be moved forward. So far, we haven't seen a large number of retirees identified through this process, and we're not anticipating this to be a significant amount of workload, but we are continuing to monitor it throughout the process as the recovery efforts continue.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ostrander. as we are expecting fire seasons to expand maybe to the full year, all year round, do we expect this moving forward to continue to be an issue? And is there some systemic resolution that we should be considering?
So right now, I have had some discussions with the governor's office and with the Office of Emergency Services, and they do expect that these will remain in place. I would assume that as we see, it was very clear, I should say, as we see additional catastrophic effects from fires or from other events that occur, that we would continue to watch this. They are expecting these executive orders to stay in place for a while, so this isn't a short-term effort. You know, it is long-term recovery, and so we will be working with CalPERS for probably a few years to come in monitoring this process.
All right, terrific. Thank you very much. I see no further requests on this item. We do have one member of the public who wishes to speak. Mr. Hutchings, if you could please take a seat to my left. Identify yourself and your affiliation for the record.
Left.
And you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair, members. Dane Hutchings with the League of California Cities. This was a little bit extemporaneous. I heard Ms. Ostrander's comments regarding the executive order, and I had a few comments from my members. So, as you well know, specifically more in the North Bay area, some of our cities have really been decimated by these wildfires, and so we very much appreciate working with Ms. Ostrander's department to solidify some language. I think one of the big challenges for our members was, even though we had the executive order from the governor, there, with regards to reinstating retired annuitants, it really is a challenge to try and navigate some of the specific language. So the circular letter certainly helps. However, there is one comment I wanted to make on behalf of a few of my cities when looking at the circular letter, and permit me from reading it. It just says, the circular letter states, any hours worked as a retired annuitant in an impacted county to expedite disaster recovery efforts during the state of emergency will not be counted towards 960-hour fiscal year. So one of the challenges that we're having is it says, so now do we have to go and track every hour of disaster recovery since it started and moving forward? I think one of the big misnomers for the use of retired annuitants in these situations is that we're pulling folks off the street to shovel wreckage. I think what a lot of what our cities are facing is that there are to qualify for FEMA dollars and to be able to get some of the federal grant funding or the federal funding to help expedite this process, you need experienced folks working on that side. So disaster recovery is a little bit narrowly, narrowly defined. We would like to continue to work with the board and the department to ensure that our cities who are going to be most impacted by these wildfires have as much flexibility as needed to ensure that they're back up on their feet. And so I just wanted to make those comments, and again, thank staff for being so flexible and working with us on this. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay, well, I see no further requests to speak on this item. That brings us to agenda item number 11, summary of board direction. I don't think there was any.
I recorded no direction.
And then that brings us to agenda item number 12, public comment. I have two members of the public who've expressed a wish to comment, Mr. Leonard and Mr. Paul De La Hoya. If you could please come up to my left. The mics will be turned on for you. And you can please identify yourself and your affiliation for the record. You'll have 3 minutes in which to speak.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Russ Leonard, City of Corona General Employees Association President. I just wanted to address the board. I saw an article yesterday in the Sacramento Bee that finally sounds like some good news. The article is titled, Pension Fund Hits Milestone. It's earning more money than it's paying out. And it states, for the first time in years, CalPERS is stable enough that it no longer expects to run deficits into the middle of the century. It appears that things are starting to take a turn for the better. However, I can't help but wonder what our financials would look like if PERS had not divested in industries that it found distasteful or not for the social good. I recall a piece that was written in the Public Retirement Journal a few years ago, and it said something that we had lost about around $10 billion in investments because of divestment. So while I understand that we need to support environmentally friendly businesses, I myself have solar panels on my house and I carpool to work. So it's a good thing. Nevertheless, before we can be instruments of social change, we need to get our financial affairs in order. When investments are made, the priority needs to be the potential for good returns. My membership and employees across the state are depending on it. My membership was imposed on this past November, and some of us are taking upwards of 25% reductions in compensation. Our city management continually cites CalPERS and its inability to make returns on investments as the main problem and the main driver for these reductions. So needless to say, we are in dire need for CalPERS to stay on track. And I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you for doing better, but I think there's always room for improvement, and I just want to make sure we stay on track with that. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing your comments with us this morning. Mr. De La Hoya.
Morning, CalPERS Board. My name is Paul De La Hoya. I work for the City of Corona, and I am a board member for the Corona General Employees Association. In my 20 years of public service, I never thought I'd have to be here to speak to the board, but I am here today to encourage this board to do what is right for the 1.9 million CalPERS members, either working or retired, and the roughly 230 general employees for the Corona. I appreciate and respect each of your personal, social, and professional views. However, when these views inhibit your ability to make decisions that's in the best interest of the members, that's a problem, okay? We have to be able to make decisions without bias and without conflict of interest. As CalPERS motto says just outside, it says, "You're here to serve those who serve California." And your main function is to pay promised benefits to its members. And as my coworker said, you know, Corona, this is a serious, serious issue. It's not a joke to us. The members that we represent, we've lost nearly 50% of our workforce in the past decade. 20 years ago to today, I work with half the people I did, and our city is larger than ever. And this is common in Southern California. Corona is in a financial crisis, and according to our city management, they're saying we can only go off of what they tell us, and they're telling us that it's mainly a CalPERS cost issue, which is why we're here today. I admit that I am a layman in CalPERS functions, but I ask myself, why did my personal 457 account have over a 15% return last year, but yet CalPERS cannot? I don't believe for a minute that my retirement financial advisors are smarter than CalPERS. That's not true. What I believe the problem is that our investors here at CalPERS have their hands tied in what they can invest in due to the bureaucracy, conflicts of interest, and the decisions, quite frankly, made by this board. I don't mean to be harsh, but it's the reality. In closing, I just want to remind this board that what your function is, and it's to pay our members. And those decisions need to be unbiased, and it needs to be for the members. And at the end of the day, we need to increase revenues. However, that needs to be done. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing your views. We do have two more members of the public who've expressed a wish to speak, Mr. Gibbons and Mr. Hutchings. If you could sit in one of these two seats to my left, identify yourself and your affiliation for the record. You'll have 3 minutes with which to speak.
Morning, Chair, members of the board. Dylan Gibbons with the California Special Districts Association. Wanted to follow up on a bit of a conversation that we had yesterday in the Finance Committee where we were talking about pre-funding trust fund, the 115 accounts, and asking CalPERS to establish one for our agencies to use. One of the issues that was raised was that this would require legislation in order to be accomplished, and that with the upcoming legislative deadline, it just wouldn't be possible this year. So we've decided to offer some assistance to you. We're going to be introducing a spot bill in the legislature that you can use as a vehicle. So we plan on working with you to develop some language that we can hopefully drop into that spot bill. So I want to let you know that that shouldn't be an impediment for you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Mr. Hutchings.
Dane Hutchings with the League of California Cities. I'm here
I'm
for
sorry
that.
to interrupt,
Oh,
Chair
sorry.
Mather,
Mr.
President
Jacobs.
Mather, but if Mr. Hutchings has already had his 3 minutes, then it's not appropriate to have an additional 3 minutes or an additional time under the rule that we have.
Is that for the entire meeting? Or
No,
is-
that's for item 12.
So he spoke on item 10.
I thought he spoke on 12 before.
He spoke on item 10.
Okay, my deep apologies then.
Thank you. Please proceed.
Get my timer started, please. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, Dane Hutchings of the League of California Cities speaking on item 12. Again, thank you for giving me the time today. I want to echo my comments, or echo Dylan Gibbons' comments from Special Districts Association. This is certainly something that we're interested in. I think it's important to note that, as we discussed yesterday, cities have the ability to do this already locally, but through a private company. Now, the challenges with that is that those private companies do, by nature, have to build in some sort of profit center for themselves to remain afloat. And so, from our perspective, having a vehicle that is housed by this body to cut down on administrative fees is only a benefit to our cities. And further, while I know that for the private 115 trusts, they cannot be reflected on our GASB reports. We can, however, I believe, with working with CalPERS, be able to use contributions made to CalPERS directly in a trust and have them be reflected in our GASB reports, which would put us in a better public financial position. So again, we are certainly, we are here and we are eager to try to get something done on this year. Any tool that we have to ensure that we can either prepay our unfunded liabilities or and ensure that we can save money either on the short term or on the long end. The ultimate goal is to continue to retain public employees and provide public services to our residents. And so with that goal in mind, we certainly support this effort, and we hope that we can be a help to this board as we develop this policy this year. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hutchings. That exhausts my requests to speak. Are there any other members of the public who wish to speak at this time? Seeing none, that brings us to the end of this meeting. We are adjourned.